Sophie Scott, welcome. Very big welcome to Roll with the Punches. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. You were recommended to me recently by a very, very good friend and a former guest of mine, Alison Wright. Shout out to Alison. Thank you. She said, this chick, this lady, this lass, she said she'd read an article on you. She said she would be a brilliant person to talk to. And when I saw the topic of what she was referring to, I was like, well, there's something I'd like to talk about. There's something I'm prone to myself, and right now I reckon a lot of people are tinkering around the edges of it just through everything we've been through in the last 12 months. So, shush Tiff, that's the introduction. Welcome, Soph.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, so just for the audience, so I wrote about my experience with burnout, and it's something that lots of people are struggling with at the moment. And burnout traditionally was associated with being in the workforce. So the first sort of um, scientific papers were written on burnout quite a few years ago to do with like doctors and nurses, like the caregiving professions. That's where it really started. But now it's people realize that, in any profession you can suffer burnout, but also not in any workplace. It can also be parental burnout, like, parents feeling overwhelmed with their responsibilities, caregiver burnout, it's really common in teachers. And there's even just pandemic burnout, the fact that things have been just very relentless, and that you can, the thing with burnout, for people who might not be aware of it, it's it's categorized really by a sense of, overwhelm, chronic stress leading to physical symptoms, cognitive dysfunction, your brain not working properly, your nervous system being all out of whack. And the other thing that's really important that they've identified is feeling that sort of loss of joy. So things that you used to love doing. So like you might have loved going to work every day, and you feel you've lost that sense of joy at just about that part of your life. So it's not depression where, for people who are depressed, you can sometimes feel like there's no joy left, or you don't enjoy anything you used to do. With burnout, it's really specific to whatever is really the cause of that burnout. So if work is becoming overwhelming and there's, like relentless stress and responsibilities, and you're not feeling supported, then you can feel like, oh, I used to love this job. And I've had lots of people in the caregiving professions, so doctors and nurses and teachers and social workers say to me, they've given their whole lives and their whole, they're very invested in the work that they do. But when you're burnt out, you lose the joy and the love for what you're doing. And that's a real sign that it's time to sort of to take a breath, take a moment, and to step back and go, you know what? I think I need to sort of rethink how I'm living my life so that I can actually be of value and be of service to people, and to keep doing the good work that these people are doing, whether it's no matter what they're doing, whether it's in the workplace or as a parent or as a caregiver.
Yeah, yeah. So walk me through how that played out for you. How was your experience? Because one thing I often say is we never, it's really hard to see what you're in the middle of. And I reckon for things like burnout, that definitely applies. Like in the middle of it until you're kind of in the depths of it all, you're just doing your thing and you're not seeing the
Exactly.
signs. So yeah, give us a bit of a snapshot about how that looked
Yeah,
for you.
yeah, sure. So my job, I work as the medical reporter for ABC. So I'm covering health stories, and I do work across all our platforms. So TV, radio, online. I do investigations as well. And so I've always been really driven and really busy and loved all that. And I also do a lot of speaking and hosting of events. But having like a busy lifestyle like that, like lots of, I'm sure your listeners have as well, you tend to rely on caffeine in the mornings to get you going, and then you might wind down at the end of the day with some wine, or to relax. And but being in that really stressful and constantly, your brain is constantly working a million miles an hour. There's these stress hormones constantly pumping through your body, like cortisol and adrenaline. And what happens with burnout is you get to the point where your body actually and your nervous system can't reset itself back to normal. So what happens when you have, like, say, an acute stressful event? So say something sudden happens and you're like, oh, you get this rush of cortisol, but then your body and your nervous system resets itself back to normal. You go, oh, okay, that stress is gone, it's over, and now I can go back and just resume my day. But what happens with chronic stress and that leading to burnout is that you're constantly in that fight or flight response in your nervous system, and the body finds it very difficult to reset it back to normal. And that's where the problems start to arise. And what happens for me and for lots of other people is that you start to develop physical symptoms of your nervous system being dysregulated. And so I often we can try to talk ourselves out of it and think, oh, I'm fine, I'm fine, there's nothing wrong with me. But the body doesn't lie. The body tells you, and we need to listen sometimes to what our bodies are telling us, that we need to step back and go, this isn't working. This isn't, your body's telling you you're doing too much. It's not working. So what happened for me was I was hosting an event, a black tie event for like about 500 healthcare workers. It was like a big awards night and all, fancy, sparkles and high heels. And when I stood up at the podium to give these awards, I started to feel so dizzy and so like I seriously felt like I was going to end up toppling over and end up in the audience and end up on the lap of one of these doctors. And so I thought, well, at least they're medical professionals, they'll know how to deal with it. But that was a real wake-up call to me that, my body was really not functioning properly, and it had been going on for a long time, and I'd just been putting it off and putting it down to like, oh, I'm just tired, I'm just overworked. But then it gets to the point where you go, no, I just can't keep doing this anymore. And that was a real wake-up call that I had to sort of step back and go, all right, I love what I do. I don't want to give that up. For some people who go through burnout, they have to walk away from what they're doing, and I didn't really want to do that. So I thought to myself, how can I keep doing the things that I love doing, which is, working in journalism and health, but do it in a way that I can feel well, and so I can actually do the job properly and be of value to people and be of service. And so then what I had to work out was, when you're in that state, you're very fatigued. The last thing you want to do is like overwhelm yourself with even more things on your to-do list. So what I said to myself was, what are the smallest actions I can take that are going to make the biggest difference in my life? And when I looked at the science of what really makes a difference in terms of how we feel and how our body feels and how our brains function, there are practices that, we all know are good for us, but when you look at the science, it's really overwhelming in terms of the impact that these practices have on your brain. And that's things like meditation. It activates the parts of the brain that help you regulate your emotions and that help regulate, planning and empathy. We know things like gentle exercise is really important. So the last thing, when you're in a burnout state, is you can't sort of like run a marathon or do a HIIT class or do a boxing class, but you can do some restorative exercise like yoga or Tai Chi or something like that. That's really going to have the benefits of exercise that have on the brain and your mood, but you're not overtaxing an already sort of stressed nervous system. And then the other thing is really focusing on connection with people and thinking about the people that were around me who could support me. And, hopefully most people, if you're feeling in that state, you can think about someone in your life who you can turn to and say, I really need help with this, particularly if it's like parental burnout. Think about if you're, is there someone you can share the load with? Often, we might be trying to do it all, like, be, all things to all people. But often if you ask people and say, look, I really need some support, I really need some help, usually people are really willing to help you. And that's what I found. And then the other thing as well, Tiffanee, was to focus on the things that I really had control over. And that's the difference, because so often in life, there are things that are outside our control, and you can get very bent out of shape wanting those things to be different, wanting people to act differently or behave differently, but at the end of the day, the only things that we have control over are our own thoughts and our own words and our own actions. And so those are the things that I had to focus on to recover from burnout. And the thing about recovery is it's a very active recovery. So it's something that you need to commit to doing every day. So it's not like you can just go, oh, I'll just do a couple of days of a walk around the block and a bit of meditation, and then I'll go plunge head back into the way I was, which is hard because, the brain likes routine and habits. So it's quite difficult to break out of habits, but it really is worthwhile. And I guess what I found was that doing these practices actually really made a difference. And I knew by looking at the science that on a scientific level, you know, these things make a difference. These things change your brain chemistry. They change how you function. And I just had to commit myself to doing it every day, which isn't always easy, but I really encourage people to try things. And the other thing is not to wait for the motivation. I guess, you know, I'm not like a natural exerciser. I'm not someone who was sporty at school, but now I see the benefits of exercise and movement, and even mindful movement. It doesn't have to be, you know, like running, or it's just whatever suits you. But it does make you feel so much better. It makes you feel so much better on the inside and on the outside, and your body, your mood, your brain, everything. And so that is what I had to do, is to find a way to incorporate those things into my life, and they started to make a difference. And just stick with it. And that's the other thing as well, just to be really consistent in your habits.
Yeah, I love that. Tell me, do you think that often, like burnout often is coming from, well, if it's from work or something that you're doing, it's coming from something that you're doing a lot of, and then also something that you're likely really identifying with. So I am a this, or I am a carer, and this is my job. And then you become so heavily bought into that how hard is it, or was it, or can it be for people to have to realise that the way that's happening needs to change, right? Because that's something that they're really identifying with.
It can be devastating, and you can go through a real sense of grief, because your identity is tied, and your sense of self-worth is tied to that job. And, you know, if you think about society, often judges us and praises people for their productivity, and, oh, wow, you've done this, you've achieved that. And that overwork and that sense of identity with your job is something that a lot of people have. And so, you know, I was lucky in the way that I could try to reframe what I was doing and still maintain the job that I had. But for lots of people, that's not an option. That for their own self-preservation, they need to step aside. And sometimes I've spoken to quite a few health professionals, and often what they'll say is that some environments, it's not possible to change that environment. They might be working in, say, like a really busy emergency department. Well, you're never going to be able to really change how that functions for some places, but they're able to then instead stay working as a doctor or a nurse, but move to a different medical environment where they're able to have more control and input into what's going on around them, and be able to take breaks and be able to go on holidays and not feel like they're letting the team down. So sometimes it's about a sidewards move rather than leaving the profession altogether. But I just would say to people, if you feel like that's the only option that for your own self-preservation, then you know deep down that that's what you need to do. Then you need to back yourself and recognize that, you know, we are all much more than the jobs, and we're more than a pay slip, and we're more than a business card. We are, you know, humans, and we can offer value and offer service to people in a number of ways, and it doesn't have to be through what your paycheck at the end of every 2 weeks.
Yeah. Do you think that emotional regulation is something that needs to be a part of recovery? So I'm just thinking of some of those, let's just say you're a doctor, you're working in a highly emotional environment. So you're dealing with people, you're with their lives, and if you're too personally bought into that emotionally, you're letting your nervous system, you're going in there, you're letting the adrenaline course through your system so can we emotionally regulate and still do that job, but have an awareness on feeling that happening in our body and training that not to happen? Is that a part of recovery?
Yes, I think it's a very good point that you make. It's a very important part of recovery, is to maintain some distance between, you know, I deal with patients a lot in my job. I'm particularly when I do investigations, I spend a lot of time with patients, particularly ones who've been harmed by the medical system. And these are very traumatized people. And you know, you want to help them. But you also have to recognize that if you buy into their trauma and become traumatized as a result, you're not actually going to do them you're not going to be of value and help and service to them if you identify too closely with them. So, but it is difficult, and it's, you know, but human nature is to want to empathize and to sympathize and be compassionate. And I think it's finding that balance between recognizing that someone is going through something difficult and wanting to be there and support them, but not taking on their experience as your own trauma. And that's something that a lot of health professionals and people in caregiving professions need to work on doing, because it is difficult. It is really difficult. You see people suffering, and it's hard not to sort of put yourself in their shoes. But it's really crucial to keep that emotional distance, I guess, so that you can be of value and service to them and help them, because that's ultimately what they're, you know, seeing you for, is so that you can help them and help improve their life. And so emotional regulation is really important. But when you're in the middle of burnout and your nervous system's all over the place, it's very difficult to do that. And so that's why getting to a state where you're feeling much better and calmer within yourself makes you much more able to do that, and to able to say, I recognize that the person in front of me is suffering and going through something. The best way I can help them is by looking after myself and helping them in a way, but not taking on the trauma that they've gone through.
Yeah, I've done a whole episode on vicarious trauma before with Erin Cotter-Smith. She researched and has done for the last 20 years the first responders from the 9/11 incident. And, you know, it was quite a while after that she was sitting down with her therapist, and they brought up the term vicarious trauma, and she'd never heard of it. And, you know, it's amazing, and I'm sure that you yourself, in the work that you do, would have had no awareness that was even a thing that you were taking on, and that you can be loading onto your system.
Exactly. And I think particularly when it's prolonged, I think the thing about trauma is that you can deal with things like a short burst of it, but it's people like first responders or you know, doctors or nurses or psychologists or psychiatrists, or people who that's their day in and day out. They're dealing with people who are in a traumatized state, that it does become more difficult to stop it becoming something that affects you as a person. So it's a skill that definitely that I think people need to learn, and it is part of recovering from being in a burnt out or overwhelmed state.
Yeah. Do you know what the really...
being able to say, you know, I appreciate your suffering, and I'm here to help you, and I'm here for you, but I'm not going to take on, I need to put that barrier up to protect and preserve my own energy and mental health, and that's really important.
Yeah. Do you know what I feel the really tricky part when we get into a state like this is when you're in burnout, or when your body is amped, and when you're tired, and when you've taxed your nervous system, you start to reach for caffeine and sugar, and when you can't sleep, you crave the things that your body knows, and we kind of do it unknowingly, because our body and our biology craves it, but our brain just does it. You know, like we don't think, we don't realize kind of what we're doing. So I think that's a real challenge, because what you need the most, you're craving the least. And
no one who's feeling stressed sits down and wants to eat a bowl of broccoli, do they?
No, they do not. But then it's like a cascading effect, because you wake up, you're like, all right, I'm going to be really good to myself today. If you're anything like me, at times like that, I'll have a really healthy breakfast, and I'm good until I've had that healthy breakfast, and then it's my brain's like, just have a little piece of chocolate. Yeah. And then it's like, I'll eat the whole block of chocolate, but
I think the thing with that is it's important to think about, you know, often we do use food as a reward, as an emotional reward for things. And so I think rather than, I don't think you want to feel deprived in any way. So my sort of workaround with that is always trying to find a healthy swap. So basically, if you like chocolate, then have like the 80 or 90% dark chocolate.
Yes.
Yeah, if you like, you know what I mean? So I don't believe in deprivation, and I think the idea of like cutting whole food groups out because they're not good for you, you know, there's very few things that are intrinsically bad for you. Maybe like, I don't know, there's probably some foods that you probably should avoid, but generally you can find a healthier alternative of what you really like eating. And that way you're not going to, because then the thing about if you do end up eating that block of chocolate, Tiffanee, is then you end up feeling worse emotionally.
Yep.
So even though you've eaten it, you've got the double whammy. You've got the double whammy of going, oh, wow, I shouldn't have eaten that chocolate. Now I've eaten it and I feel worse. So you start beating up on yourself, and your self, you know, esteem and self-worth takes a battering. So if you can think like, oh, you know what, I feel like some chocolate, but, you know, I know that if I eat the 80% or the 70% dark chocolate, that I can eat a bit of that and it's not going to harm me in any way, and it might even be good for me, then it's a win-win. So I think the idea of like, particularly if you're feeling stressed and overwhelmed, don't put more pressure on yourself by having to eat a perfect diet, but just think about healthy swaps and healthy alternatives so you can get that, you know, the fix that, like you're saying, your body's going, I really want something. I really want, you know, I need something to pep me up. But you're just going to end up feeling worse if you do give in and just eat the whole block of chocolate. But yeah, I don't believe in deprivation. So I think you want to have the quality of what you eat, and like and also not only what you're consuming with food, but, you know, whether it's podcasts or television shows or streaming services, like have a think about that, because that all has a massive impact too on how you feel. Like if you're, you know, on the weekends, I really try to switch off the news cycle, and I'll just listen to amazing podcasts that have nothing to do with anything to do with my work, and are really uplifting, and it totally changes your mindset and your point of view, and it puts you in a completely different headspace. And so that is really important as well. So just for people, and that's making a conscious decision to do that. So like consciously thinking about, what are you consuming day to day in terms of like, you know, are you always, you know, doom scrolling? Are you always, you know, focusing on, you know, even watching crime shows, like, or, you know, shows with violence, when they've done studies, they've shown it affects people on a physiological level. So, you know, our bodies react to stuff, even if we're not aware of it. And so that's why it's really, really important to think about what are the positive, more uplifting things you can put into your life in terms of what you're consuming, in terms of not just food, but in your diet generally, of like media and podcasts and stuff like that.
I love that you mentioned that. I love it. I never watch the news at all. I don't. In fact, I barely turn the television on. But to the point that, and when people kind of hang it on me because I've got no idea what's going on in the world, that's, you know, I say I don't like when I turn the news on now. It's such a like I feel it, right, because the music.
Do you get that physical, like that sort of gut reaction of like, oh, it's all bad news?
Yes, because the tone, the words they use, the tones they speak in, and the background music, and that's just of a coming up on the news tonight, and I'm like, you manipulative buggers! Like, don't you pull at my nervous system like that? I'm like, I don't want to know.
So it's really good, and I think what you're doing there is something that I think it's really good for people to do, is that put up those boundaries, because like you've recognized that is something that triggers you. So it's better for your system and your nervous system to not be exposed to that on an ongoing basis. And it can be the same with you know, if there's someone in your life that is, you know, when you spend time with them, you come away going, oh my God, that was so draining. Then you've got to think about, you know, is that, as hard as it might be, is that person really bringing out the best in me, or am I going to be, every time I spend time with them, I feel absolutely drained emotionally, and it's not good for you. It's not good for you. So again, it's that boundary and that self-preservation, and focusing on your needs as well. And it can be difficult sometimes, because we do tend to be people pleasers, a lot of us. You know, we want people to like us. But you have to set those boundaries to preserve your own time and energy and focus. And otherwise you end up in that really overwhelmed, stressed out, burnt out state that you definitely don't want to be in.
Yeah, 100%. In fact, earlier I did I signed up to Netflix recently because I'm a bit of an overworker myself, hence wanting to dive into this topic with you. But So I downloaded Netflix, or I signed up to Netflix, and I thought that if I have a subscription to this, then sometimes I'll switch off and I'll watch something. And again, when choosing something to watch, when you said before, like watching crime things, when I was young, when I was a kid, I used to be like, yeah, let's watch a horror movie. Let's watch a thriller. And now, because I've spent, the last year having these conversations around a lot of these topics, I had all this awareness, and all of a sudden I was like, I don't know if I want to do that to my emotions. I don't want to be taken there, because I'm now well aware that everything we feel, it has a physiological response. When you sit and you feel frightened by a movie, there's a physiological response inside our body. Now,
exactly, as if it was actually whatever's happening on the screen was happening to you in real life.
Exactly, and like in the middle of a pandemic where that neurochemistry is being released far too often already, I was like, I might just watch a love story.
Yeah, so I think that putting those boundaries in place and recognizing that everything we do does have an impact on you physically, mentally, on the neurotransmitters and the chemicals in the brain, and making those mindful decisions to make choices that are going to benefit you rather than make you feel crappy afterwards. So I think, yeah, good on you. And I think it can take discipline, but it's definitely worthwhile.
What are the things that were really hard for you to change or implement?
The things that were hardest to change were things that are, 80% of our thoughts and behaviors are automatic. We don't think about it. We just do it. So for me, in the mornings, like the first thing I would do would be wake up, grab my phone and start checking emails or start checking news sites. But I recognize that that's a really bad way to start the day, because basically what you're doing is you're setting up the day with that sort of stressed, dysregulated nervous system. Whereas if you set it up in a more mindful way, so being disciplined and go, okay, I'm going to, as soon as I wake up, that's my time where I need to just do a meditation for like 5 minutes, even just lying in bed, just start the day with some deep breaths and in a mindful way, then do some exercise in the morning, some movement, and just scheduling it in, just like you would schedule in. And I also really like the idea of habit stacking, where you do one thing and another. So it's like, okay, might be do a workout and then eat straight afterwards. So basically breakfast and the workout are like, most people are going to eat breakfast every day. So you just habit stack and go, right, it's going to be workout, breakfast, or it's going to be coffee, walk, whatever. So that way, the more tricky habits, like the exercise, is attached to something that you're already going to do. And that can be easier to then stick to those habits, because it becomes automatic. You don't even think about it. You're just like, okay, well, it's 7:30. It's time to do the workout, and then I'm going to eat breakfast straight after. Or it's 10 o'clock. I'm going to go and walk to the cafe down the road. That'll be my, exercise. I'm going to get coffee when I get there, or, whatever. So stacking those habits together helps you overcome the fact that so much of what we do is just automatic, and it's mindless, not mindful. So you don't have to think about it if you're already pairing it with a habit that you're doing every day. So that made a big difference to me. So for me, just starting the day well, carving out those times of the day for myself. So like, rather than just, working all day, just taking like maybe 10 or 15 minutes in the middle of the day, rather than just sort of eating lunch and working at the same time, but just going, no, I'm just going to actually take 15 minutes or so. Even those short little breaks, it doesn't need to be hours and hours. These things don't need to take up big chunks of your time, because we're all really time poor. That's the thing. So it's not like we all have all these extra hours to do these things that, we know we should be doing. So I guess that's the other thing, that these small actions can actually make a big difference. You don't have to be doing a massive transformation in how you're living your life so that you can feel a lot better. So even small actions like 10 minutes of meditation, a 15-minute walk in the middle of the day, and then doing something, something mindful at night as well. And then that way you've done 3 things for yourself that are going to make you feel so much better, and you haven't had to, you've still managed to do everything else in your calendar.
Have you heard of the term decision fatigue?
Yes, definitely. And that's why if you do it routine, you don't have to make the decision. It's just automatic.
Yeah. I notice big time if I, You know, even simple things like what we wear. Like, I've spent the last year, or probably the last 6 if I'm really honest, wearing hoodies and muscle tops because I'm always in gyms. And if there's a time where I have to wear different attire because maybe rocking up in a muscle top isn't really appropriate, I get the decision-making process is quite an emotional process because all of a sudden I have to make decisions I haven't had to make every single day. And I've gotten really comfortable wearing what I wear.
Yeah, I think that is definitely an issue. And so the more you can have routines that are going to benefit you, so you don't have to decide to do it. You don't have to make a decision to do exercise. You don't have to make a decision to do meditation, or you don't have to make a decision to eat something that's going to be good for you. It's already there and done. Then it takes away that discretion and that extra burden of having to go, as well as everything else. Now these girls are telling us we've got to meditate, we've got to exercise, we've got to do all this other stuff. Well, what we're saying is it's just very short little amounts, you know, and the fact is that the science is overwhelming that these practices make a difference. They make a difference to how your brain works. They make a difference to your mood. And even if you're not motivated to do it, that's the thing, Tiffanee, like, you know, not everyone's a natural born exerciser, not everyone's sporty. And, you know, you might have told yourself the story that, I'm not sporty or I'm not into exercise. But I would just urge people to find what works for them, that helps them feel calmer and that calms their nervous system. And it might be for some people, it might be just like getting out in the garden, you know, for like half an hour and getting away from all the screens and other people and just pottering in the garden. It might be going for a walk. You might be playing with pets. It might be listening to like an uplifting podcast. Whatever it is for each individual, find what works for you and just stick with it. And you will find that it does make a big difference to how you feel. And that's the thing. It will make you feel better, and it's worth persevering with.
What do you look out for? What are the sneaky little telltales that are probably not that obvious, but that you now look for and go, right, I gotta chill out?
I think it's things like not putting those boundaries in place. So, for example, if you're letting your work hours extend to really what is, you know, reasonable, and even my son said to me, you know, once, he's like, why are you checking emails at like 9 o'clock at night? I'm like, that's actually a really good question. Why am I? You know, I don't need to. You know, I don't need to be checking my emails at 9 o'clock at night. So I shouldn't be. I should put the phone down. I should focus on and be present with the people around me. And so I guess being mindful of where you're likely to slip up, and it's probably going to be those things that are tied to, if you value yourself as like a highly productive worker or employee, you know, we all want to do well. We want to succeed and we want to be seen as hardworking, but it can't be at the detriment of your own physical and mental health. You've got to put that first. And that's what I say to everyone that I work with and everyone that I talk to. It's like, you've got to look after yourself first, and you've got to put your own mental and physical well-being above all else, because you want to be the best version of yourself for the people around you and the people that you love. You know, you want to be, you don't want to be fatigued and tired and burnt out for those people. You want to be there to love them and care for them. And if you don't take the time to look after yourself, then you're not going to be able to do that.
I think about a sprinter. And like, imagine your job as being metaphorically as being a sprinter, and imagine how poor a sprinter's performance is if they all of a sudden go from training X amount to training 8 hours a day or 10, 12 hours. So from the moment I'm awake, everywhere I go, I'm going to sprint there. Like, imagine how their performance, and that's kind of how we live. Like, we think more is better, more is better, more is better.
And your analogy of the athletes a really good one, because if you think about athletes, you know, elite athletes, the power of rest and the importance of resting and rejuvenating and replenishing your energy. You know, athletes, that's an important part of their training, is building in those rest days so that they can go, okay, I trained really hard and I'm going to rest and I'm going to relax and I'm going to do something replenishing, and then I'm going to get back into it the next day. They don't just go hell for leather 7 days a week. And, and that's why they are so successful, because they do recognize the power of taking that time out. And, whatever it is that you think is so important, it'll still be there the next day. The emails will still be there, and I think it's important, for example, like I've now started working 4 days a week instead of 5. And so I put an out of office on my emails on the day that I'm not there, just so that that's a really outward sign to people that I'm not available. This is not a day that I'm working. I'm not available today. So that sends a very strong signal to people that I'm putting a boundary up and saying, this is my time. And I think you owe it to yourself and your own well-being to do that, to put those boundaries up, and so that you do have the time and energy to do the things that you really value and you really want to. Because if you're being pulled in a million different directions, particularly with parental burnout as well, you can feel like there's nothing left to give. You have nothing left in the tank. And parental burnout is really, really common. And when I started writing about burnout on my Instagram account, and I put up one post about parental burnout, I was just flooded with people saying that's exactly how they felt. They felt overwhelmed. They felt it was just, they were constantly stressed and not feeling like they were doing a good job. And then I think as a parent as well, you need to give yourself permission to look after yourself as well. As well as you look after your kids, you've got to look after yourself. And so I would urge parents as well to carve out some time for themselves so that they can replenish and not always be 100% focused on giving to other people, but you need to give to yourself as well.
Yeah. Do you think, I feel like there would be a real danger, or there's two dangers of parenting, I guess. One is you've got some people who are a parent and an employee, so they're I'm this, and then I work, and then I go home and I work. But then I feel like if you're a stay-at-home parent, then I feel like you're in the danger of almost telling yourself, well, I don't thinking that that's not work. Like, that's work. Like,
it's work. Yeah.
Your job is raising a human, but you're probably not even giving yourself the kudos for that you would if you're doing a job.
If you're a stay-at-home parent, you're working just as hard, if not harder, than someone who's going off to an office job or another sort of job. And you need to recognize that and give yourself the credit that you're already doing a really hard job. And so I think it's, parenting is a full-time gig, whether you have another gig in the office or just a full-time gig at home looking after kids. It's full on, and you need, as a parent, to be able to go, where's the time that I can take out for myself to replenish myself, to look for support. If you don't have a partner, then look for sort of in your extended family or friends to say, like there's that phrase, like it takes a village to raise a child. Well, often these days we don't have that village. We're doing it on our own. And so you've got to create that support around you so that you don't feel like you're doing it all by yourself. And, the good thing about burnout, whether it's from work or caregiving or parental, is like there is a way out. It takes some self-discipline, but you don't have to be feeling like that forever. And I think it's really important that more people are talking about it. And I've been blown away, particularly on social media, with just the number of people who've talked about their experience with burnout, whether it's in a workplace or in their family life. And I think it's good, if people realize that they're not going through something, that they're not the only ones who are feeling that way, and that you can find help and resources to get you through it. And there are practices that are going to make a difference.
Yeah.
And to not suffer and don't feel like you have to get through it on your own. And so, I think that's just a really important message. If you do feel like you're struggling for whatever reason, just definitely reach out for support from, whether it's, someone that you care about, whether it's a health professional, whether it's someone who writes about burnout. But definitely make that connection, because that can make such a difference.
When someone's in that position, like people listening now that are like, yep, that's me, I'm in the middle of it right now, what what are our expectations on how long until I can start feeling better, and how long until I'm kind of in a place where we call ourselves recovered, or to a degree?
Well, I think you need to define for yourself what better looks like for you. Like, what do you want to be able to do again and feel up to doing? And then recognize that recovery is an active, it's like it's a verb, not a noun. It's a daily practice. So it's recovering is something that you do every day in terms of the choices that you make, the practices that you put into your life, the people that you have around you, where you put your time and energy and focus. And it can be a short process to feel better pretty quickly. But then, like we said earlier, you've got to be careful not to slide back into bad habits. So making these changes to your life, making them as routine and as automatic as possible, gives you the best chance of success, because you're bypassing the brain's, the fact that we do just act on autopilot so much of our lives. We don't make conscious decisions in what we do and how we spend our time. So, but humans love rituals as well. So like building in rituals so that it's a daily thing that you do every single day. And also being kind to yourself. If some days you're like, oh, I just don't think I'm up to doing, like now, because I am feeling better, I can do like an exercise class pretty much every day. But some days I'll be like, I just don't think I can do that really more intense one. I need something more gentle. I need to do some yoga, something more mindful. And you know what? That's all right. That's good. That's okay. And don't be hard on yourself. Your body's telling you that's what you need at that moment. But rather than going, oh, I'm just not going to do anything, or I just won't do any exercise for the next, couple of days, doing something is always better than doing nothing. And I think we often get into that very black and white thinking, the very all or nothing thinking. And so that's been a real shift for me as well, to try to get out of that all or nothing thinking. So doing something, even a small amount of something, whether it's meditation or exercise, is better than doing a lot of nothing. So I would really just say to people, when I wrote about burnout on my website and for Mamma Mia, I talked about only doing 8 minutes. It was 8 minutes in the morning and 8 minutes at lunchtime and 8 minutes at the end of the day. So we're not talking about big periods of time here. And those small changes can make a big difference.
I love that. What about are there macro rituals? So if I called those the micro, the small daily habits that keep us in check, do you have any kind of macro, like every 6 months I do this, or every this, often say, like, just getting out of your own life for a moment, how much clarity you can get when you find yourself not in the same environment, not in the same routine, just for a day or two. Do you implement that?
Yes, I think that's really important, because changing your physical location has a really big impact on your psychological outlook. So as much as you can, factor that in, and if you can organize even like a weekend to go somewhere that is outside your normal environment. And, particularly if you can pair it with, with people spending some time with people that you really enjoy their company, and just getting away for, a weekend. And that's the thing, again, like a small thing. It doesn't need to be, oh, let's organize a big, 2-week holiday. But no, just even saying to someone, why don't we just have a weekend in the next 6 weeks or so, where we go and just, go somewhere just with some mates or another couple that you might really like spending time with, and just get out of your own environment and your own head and have a change of pace, a change of scene, and that can make you feel amazing. So yes, I definitely recommend putting in those breaks from the day to day, because that makes a huge difference as well. You come back refreshed and with a completely different, state of mind. And I often like going to like health retreats or somewhere where, you're removed from all the sort of day to day, like there's, no phones and no screens and stuff like that. And you're just doing lots of restorative, lots of things to nurture yourself. And you can come back from those places feeling absolutely amazing.
I remember a few years ago doing a silent retreat, a 3-day silent retreat. Lo and behold, People wouldn't believe it.
Wow. How was that? What was that like?
It was actually beautiful, and it was really funny because I'm a personal trainer, so I'm loud, and I'm always taught you cannot shut me up. And so when I first told people I'm going to do this silent retreat, they were like,
what now?
Yeah, but it was funny because I thought to myself, why do they think I can, like, it's not the silence is not the thing that's going to challenge me at all, because like when I'm not out in front of people, so like being alone and quiet and in my own space is very much my thing. But then I realised, well, other people don't see that because they're not here. But it was amazing. What I didn't realise when I booked it was there was going to be 6 to 7 hours a day accumulative of 1.5 hour sessions of meditation, silent meditation.
Wow.
Yeah. And I actually didn't struggle. Like at this particular time, it all felt kind of too easy for me. But at the very end of that, we went around the circle and we heard people's experience. And up until that point, I was like, I feel a bit disappointed. I haven't had any epiphanies. This didn't challenge me. I wanted more out of it. But then when I heard all these different experiences, and some people got quite emotional, and it just it gave me goosebumps. And I remember thinking, I want to stay longer. But I remember walking to the car and turning it on. It was in Healesville in Victoria, and I had to drive back to Port Melbourne. And I turned the car on and I turned the radio off, and I was like, I don't want that noise. And I thought, I've never in my adult life felt this sense of complete and utter calm and peace.
That's beautiful. So that was an amazing gift that you got from that retreat.
Big time. But here's my question. That was 3 years ago. Why do we not do what we know and what we say we will do? Why do we always say one day? Because I haven't gone back yet.
That's the thing. We always say, like, I'll do this as soon as I've got time, or as soon as I'm not so busy, as soon as this and as soon as that. I think it's because we're not putting our own needs first. We're putting the needs of other people. We're putting our work first. We're putting our partner first, or our kids. So that's why it's important to focus on your own needs, because if you look back at that experience and go, wow, I felt amazing when I left there. You would have felt your nervous system would have been so calm. You would have felt so centered and beautiful. And you're worthy of giving yourself that gift again. That's the thing. And that's what I would say to people, like, whatever it is that everyone's different. Everyone's got something that they really love doing and that they find a great deal of joy from. And, you're all worthy. We're all worthy of giving ourselves those gifts of the things that we love doing. And you just have to recognize that and say, I'm worthy, and I'm going to devote that time and energy and focus to the things that make me feel really good. And then you will find that you do feel so much better.
I love it. Tell me before we tell people how they can follow you and get some of your amazing advice and influence, tell us, what are the couple of takeaways that you want people listening right now to take away from this, maybe to implement or to do, or a new way of thinking?
So I think the first thing is to focus on what you can control. Often if you're feeling frustrated or overworked or overwhelmed, you might want other people to change, or other people's behavior to change, and that can be a recipe for disaster, basically, because that's not going to happen necessarily. So I think that's the good first step to whatever you want to do and however you want to improve or change your life, to think about what are the things that you can influence. And that's your own thoughts, your own actions, and your own behavior. And so if you focus on those 3 things to start with, and then think about what are the things and where are those moments in your day that you can really find those little micro changes, those micro habits that you can introduce, and recognize that even if you're not motivated to do it, the science of the benefits is really overwhelming. So don't wait for the motivation because it may never come. So that's what my advice would be. Just, it's a bit like Nike, but just do it and stick with it. And then you will find that you do feel so much better.
Yeah, I love it. Where do we find you?
So,
where do we stalk you, Soph?
stalk me. Well, stalk me on Instagram. So my Instagram handle is Sophie Scott and the number 2. So it's just SOPHIESCOTT and the number 2. So I post lots of resources on mental health and psychology and burnout on my Instagram. And then my website is just sophiescott.com.au. And yeah, I'd love to connect with people and hear their experiences. And it's been great to have this chat with you, Tiff. Really good.
Yeah, and I think it's an important one, especially right now. So thank you so much, Soph.
Been a pleasure.